Hello, everybody. This is Raymond Espanola. In this lecture video, I'm going to share with you Gender 101 or SOGIE. SOGIE stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Expression. But in this lecture video, we combine that with sexual characteristics. This lecture video is chapter 1 for the subject GE, Gender and Society. We will cover a number of questions, starting with how gender is different from sex, what gender identity is, gender expression, gender roles, the gender binary, gender nonconformity, what it means to be transgender, and intersex. And we will end it with a complex connection of gender and sexuality, which will lead us to conclude the lecture video with the concept of SOGIE. First question, how gender is different from sex. We know that sex refers to our biological characteristics. Usually, that is simplified as anatomical differences between physical bodies. Sex is typically assigned at birth as either male or female, depending on the external appearance of genitals. On the other hand, when we say gender, gender is so much more. It's so much complicated. It is a multifaceted aspect of our identity. Later, I'll give you a definition of gender, which is the definition that we will be adapting for the entire subject. Now, take note, if we just have to focus on sex, take we have people who are intersex. These people have bodies that do not fully match our expectations of being male or being female because their external genitalia are vague. When we say vague, their genitals can have combinations of female reproductive organs and male reproductive organs. Okay, so typically we know that when babies or when individuals have XX chromosomes, we expect them to have ovaries, vagina, vulva, and clitoris. But again, in later chapters, you will see that there are individuals who may have differences in sexual development because despite having XX chromosomes, they will grow to they will grow to have penis and other male reproductive organs. Okay, so that's on the typicality no of sexual development, male and female. But later on, we will focus on what it means to be intersex. But the idea is there that sex refers to our biological characteristics, no biological characteristics that depend on the appearance of genitalia, just like this one. To put it simply, being male means having penis, and um being female means having breast development, wider hips, and also vagina. And yes, we have this more detailed depiction of what it is to be typically male and what it is to be typically female. We can't see intersex here. Later, I'll show you what an intersex individual can can possess. Now, just as we are assigned a sex at birth, we are also assigned a gender role. Take note of my terminology here. It's not gender per se. People assign us a particular gender role. When we say gender role, these are the expectations that people set upon us. And usually the gender roles that our parents, our peers, our teachers set upon us generally reflect our assigned sex. Meaning, if a baby has a vagina, no, has vulva, people would expect that baby to be a girl, to be a woman, to be feminine. Okay? Again, these are expectations and these are external from the from the from the person, from the baby. On the other hand, if a baby is born to have penis, generally the gender expectation or the gender roles that are assigned are those of stereotypically being a man. Okay. Now, being raised as girls or boys means people assign us gender roles, which are positions and responsibilities expected of us based on our assigned gender or based on our assigned sex. Okay. And note that these gender roles can vary from country to country and even within countries. We're very much familiar of this ceremony, of this celebration when a couple announces the sex of their baby. They call it gender reveal, and the language that they use is boy and girl. And we should start, you know, thinking about that practice if that is correct, no? If that is accurate. Because take note that what we can know from a biological standpoint or from a factual perspective is the sex of the baby, that is being male or female. We don't know if your male baby will eventually believe that he is male, if he's a man, or if he will grow to feel like layaki siya or babae ba or something else. Anyway, so these are the usual expectations also, the gender roles for male babies. They're expected to have careers like being engineers, while babies with vagina and vulva, they're expected to be caretakers, babysitters, um, managers of the household, and things like that. No? Now, aspects of our gender, it's clear. Aspects of our sex are biological, and that is clear. While gender is a bigger concept. Take note here that gender, we interchange that to SOGIE. Gender is an amalgamation. Moingon gani tag amalgamation, that's a combination of several components. First, chromosomes, those X's and XY's, anatomy, which includes the internal and external sex organs, hormones, psychology, which includes our sense of who we are, our gender identity, and even our patterns of sexual attraction, romantic attraction, and culture, which refers to our behaviors, how we present our gender identity, how we express our gender identity, the mannerisms that we do in connection to our view of who we are as far as gender is concerned. Okay? So it's a complicated concept. So we can say here that sex is just part of gender. Okay? Gender is a big concept, multifaceted concept. We can think of the difference in this manner that sex is is present among humans and also among animals, male, female, because our qualifiers here are biology, anatomy, physiology, chromosomes, hormones, genes. On the other hand, kaning gender or SOGI that is unique to all humans and that's multifaceted and complex. It exists on a continuum. It can change over time. It can differ from sex. Take note of that. It can differ from sex. So, ang gender ng tao can be very much complicated. Dili siya kung very linear na kung male ang baby, mahimo dadyong uh, man, mahimong boy. No, the the progress, the development of gender can be complicated, no? Can be complex. Later, we'll show you how complex can that be. And remember, kaning box sa kilid, you can see here that society, environment, experience, politics, history, ethnicity, and other social factors can influence how we view gender, how we understand gender, how we perceive of ourselves as gendered individuals. For you to have a better appreciation of the the of that illustration, you can see here kaning SOGIE, kaning gender as an individual characteristic, as a human characteristic, that is only part of a bigger conversation regarding gender. Okay, so you can see here SOGIE refers to gender identity, gender expression, even sexual characteristics, anatomy, hormones, and sexual orientation, patterns of attraction. And remember, kana siya na asa to nga. Okay? And that is at the psychological level, at the level of the person. Na ay gitawag na gender roles. Kaning gender roles reside outside the person, because again these are expectations, no, these are responsibilities that people assign to us in relation to usually our sex. Okay, that's why you can read here societal expectations of parents, um, peers, schools, teachers, and even the careers that you will pursue and your role in the family. And kanang pattern of people setting expectations, setting gender roles, magdepende na siya sa country to country na mention na nato earlier, or even in within countries. So naay taglain-lain ng mga gender relations. So ang usapang gender relations, usapang sociology na ni siya. Okay? So mulantaw na ka sa interpersonal interactions, dynamics in the workplace, dynamics at home, dynamics in school, and a bigger concept is the institutionalized gender, where country level or cultural patterns na of distribution of power, of what it is to be masculine, what it is to be someone of power. Generally, the traditions, the norms are come from how gender is institutionalized. So for example, in a religious institution, gender is institutionalized in a way that only biologically male become priests, become pastors, become leaders, no? While biologically female individuals cannot take such high or big leadership roles. That is within religious institutions or in many religious institutions. Okay? And kana siya mo affect sa gender relations, mo affect sa gender roles, and that can be external. These are external, and syempre we don't mean na wala sila effect, but they will have an influence on how every person, every person's SOGI is shaped. Okay? Now, karon, much of our conversations in this subject will revolve around SOGI. Okay? Siguro that's because of me na psychology major, nga may the focus of our content is gender as a psychological concept. But it doesn't mean na dili ta mo touch aning gender roles. Na atay chapter on becoming gendered, chapter on the specific gender roles or even the patterns of gender development, and as what might have mentioned in class, no, that we will have chapters on the institutionalized gender, particularly legislations in the Philippines, the protections that we afford to biologically female, and the protections that we afford to um, people with diverse SOGI, no? So we'll have more of that. So later. Now let's go to gender identity. So I hope that's clear na no, nga sex and gender are different because sex can be part of gender, and gender is a so much bigger concept. That's why it deserves its own subject. It deserves murag its own spotlight na pang isahan siya ka subject na mas kinaan na siya sa you self is separate gihapon siya kay medyo dako siya nga usapan. Okay? Now, let's go to gender identity. Gender identity is our identification of who we are, how we categorize ourselves. That's how you put it simply. Do you feel, do you think that you are a man, a woman, or something else? That is your cognitive understanding of who you are. Okay? For some people, gender identity is consistent with the sex assigned at birth, leading people to believe that sex and gender should be congruent. Now, take note, that's not always the case. There are people who would feel that who would think that they are men, but they are biologically female. Now, these things exist because it is not always the case that sex and gender identity go together. Okay? Dili sa tanan panahon congruent ni sila. So, pwede silang makonsider na independent of each other. Si sex, lahi ang domain, lahi pod ang domain ng gender identity. Okay? Gender identity is how our brain thinks about ourselves as gendered beings and what those genders mean to us, regardless of what body parts we do or we do not possess. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether we have penis or vulva. What matters is our understanding, how our brain thinks of who we are. Man, woman, or wala sa duha, or pareho man and woman at the same time. Okay? So naatay question dire, what really makes someone a man or a woman? Is it our physical characteristics? You might be asked of this question in class. Remember, ang atong gender identity, ato nang na-mention, dili siya magdepende sa imong sexual characteristics. Okay? So if person will say woman siya maski naa siya'y penis. That's how we regard gender identity. Adto magmatter sa kung unsay iyang belief, kung asa siya comfortable. That's how we respect people. Okay? Now, there can be there can be many types of people based on gender identity. Natay gitawag nga cisgender individuals, cisgender men, cisgender women. Kanina mga tao, they have congruent sex and gender identity. So they're born with penis and they believe, they understand that they are men. They are born with vagina and they believe and that they think that they are women. So, congruent. Kasagaran mga tao, cisgender people. Okay? So, even myself, no? Na I penis and then I think I'm a man. I don't think I'm a woman. Okay? And I think most of you also, you are cisgender individuals. Unsa maning transgender people? Ang transgender people, these are people who have incongruent sex and gender identity. Okay? Dili mag-match, dili congruent. So naa sila'y penis and then they feel woman sila. Naa sila'y vagina and then they feel na man sila. Okay? Usually, ang atong timailhan nga is transgender, or let's say because this is subjective, no, you know nga transgender ka if number one, you are not happy, you are not contented, you feel that you are born in the wrong body. Kay ang imong brain magtuo siya nga babae siya, pero mulantaw ka sa imong external genitalia pang lalaki man. Okay? So naa gadyoy uban nga mo suffer ng extreme discomfort, dili sila happy. Okay? Kay gusto nila magpa-change, no? Ng, mag-sex reassignment surgery or gender confirmation surgery. Kay lagi, they feel that they're born in the wrong body. Okay? So, ang uban, magpataas ng hair because when they look at themselves in the mirror, ang ilang makita man, but ang ilang identity is kuan man, woman. So, now, remember, ang pagka-transgender dili na magdepende sa operation sa sex reassignment surgery. Kung ang tao wala mag-undergo ng sex reassignment surgery, still the person can be considered a transgender person because again, how do we define being transgender? We define that just based on whether gender identity is congruent to the person's sex assigned at birth. Now, we have a third category. These are people who are non-binary. Kaning people nga non-binary, I'm sure you have heard of this terminology already. These are people who identify with both men and women or a gender that is neither. Buti pasabot, wala sa duha. Okay, these are people nga ang ilang understanding of gender identity is wala sa pagkaman, wala sa pagkawoman, or they don't have gender at all. They don't want to be affected. They don't want to be influenced by the gendered expectations of society. Okay? So that's why kung imo sila lantawon, ang ilang gender expression can be confusing. Kay murag bae, murag laki, because again, that is their purpose. That is what they want. They want people to think of them as genderless, gender-free, or both man and woman together. Okay? As early as 3 years old, toddlers have already a sense of gender identity. So take note of that. As early as 3 years old, kabalo na ta kung man ba kita or woman ba kita. If we should be loyal and faithful to the definition of gender identity, diri pa ta makaingon nga ang baby boy or girl. So kanang mga ceremonies nga gender reveal, it's a boy, it's a girl, that should end, or siguro that should be modified na sex reveal na male or female siya nga babies. Anyway, despite having it early on, gender identity is not always expressed in words or actions. Why do you think so? Sa kay rason nga ang gender identity present na siya, ma-form na siya ang bata, toddlers as early as 3 years old, conscious and aware na siya, kasabot na siya kung man, woman, or kung they're born in the wrong body or non-binary. Pero dili siya ma-express, ginatago. So unsa kay rason? I want you to think of that question. Now, let's go to the closely related concept that is gender expression. Ang gender expression, sa term padaan, expression, how we express, how we manifest our gender identity. Okay? Pero, as later, as you will see, ang atong gender expression can be sometimes independent of our gender identity. So the bottom line here is gender expression is our outward appearance, outward gendered appearance. Characteristics that are commonly gendered include clothing, jewelry, and hair length and style, and also includes activities, playing basketball, badminton, lifting weights at the gym, interests and mannerisms that are all observable. Gender expressions can vary with culture na atay gitawag nga masculine gender expression. Mao ni ang pag-present ng kaugalingon in a way that a culture stereotypically associates with being a man. Okay? So again, magdepende na sa culture. There is a Philippines, for example, kung ang bata mag-basketball, we know that that is something masculine. Okay? So kung ang bata mag-shorts, kung ang bata mubo na hair, we automatically believe nga kana masculine na mga gender expressions. So dili sila mag-earrings, dili sila mogamit ng tote bags, dili sila magpataas ng hair because kaning earrings, tote bags, and magpataas ng hair, kani gina-consider sa atong society as feminine gender expressions. Okay? Naapod tayo gitawag nga androgyny, which is a combination of masculine and feminine traits or a non-traditional gender expression. Gender expressions that don't necessarily fit the categories of being masculine or feminine in a certain culture. Okay, now take note. Mauna akong na-mention a while ago. Gender expression may or may not correspond with gender identity. Kung sa may buti pasabot ani, na ay tao nga cisgender man. Pero ang iyang gender expression can be feminine in a particular culture. Okay? And it doesn't mean problematic. It doesn't signal a problem. That's the way it is. Tungod kay, gender expression varies depending on the cultural context and time. Consider crying, for example. It's a sign of vulnerability in many cultures. Kung maghilak ang tao, weak. And then kasagaran, normal ang paghilak kung babae, dili normal kung ang lalaki ang maghilak. But remember, it used to be a sign of heroism in feudal Japan. So form of murag status, no? Or murag ginarespeto ang mga tao sa una sa Japan, tong feudal history of Japan na kung maghilak, that's a good quality, good characteristic ng mga layaki. Now, what other behaviors are examples of gender expressions that vary across culture, leading us to, believe that gender expression may or may not correspond with gender identity. So na ay kaninga figure na sa una, ang pink is associated to boys while blue is associated to girls. So feminine ang blue before and masculine ang pink, but over time nag-change siya. So nahimo na karon nga feminine ang pink o ng mga Barbie, mga strong na mga pink, and wearing skirts. Kaning medyo dili na siya pants, mga palda na siya. So nag-change na ang panahon. We have changes in fashion na kung magsuot kita ng palda, that can look like masculine already. And kani ang perfect example, kaning si Harry Styles in 2020 na siya photo shoot where he was presented with feminine gender expressions, feminine clothing. Okay? Pero the way we look at him, we don't think of him as transgender. We don't think of him as non-binary. Ang tao or siya mismo is vocal nga he's neither transgender and non-binary. Now, what can you say about this one? What does it say about gender? Na kung ang tatay magdalag fast food, fun dad daw siya. While kung ang nanay magdala ng fast food, lazy mom daw siya. I'm sure na inyong na-process nga naatay expectation nga ang mom dapat kugi sa balay na magluto. Okay? So, ang ato pag expectation sa mga tatay, so busy sa trabaho, so normal na sa ila magdala ng fast food for, for everybody at home to eat, no? Now, Mao ni atong transition towards gender roles. Ato initially na present unsa ning gender roles in the earlier slides. Gender roles are expectations na atong ginaset sa mga tao. Okay? Gender roles are those spoken and unspoken duties that are assigned to a person based on their sex or gender identity. Gender roles not only vary throughout the globe and over time, but also within a particular community. In 1870 in the US, women worked as miners, steel workers, hunters, locksmiths. In ancient Egypt, there were powerful women who held highest positions of leadership, for example, Cleopatra. And in pre-colonial Philippines, that is before the Spaniards colonized the Philippines, we used to have female leaders called babaylans, who were warriors, healers, priestesses, and sages. No? So, naatay mga taglahi-lahi na mga gender expectations or gender roles for women and men and third gender category kay magdepende man na sa panahon, no? So karon ang ato expectation lagi generally in some cultures women have to stay at home, magpamilya ra siya. Pero sa una na ay expectation na ang mga Pinoy na mga babae dapat mahimong warrior, mahimong healer, priestess. So maotong cases of babaylans in the Philippines. Now, take note, gender roles are fluid. They can change through time. However, within a specific culture, as one strays from the norms of accepted gender roles, skepticism and devaluing are common. Sa may buot ipasabot ani. Kasagaran, kung ang tao na mo claim siya nga man siya, no? Ang iyang gender identity is man. Tapos nagkataon nga male pod siya. So congruent. That's a case of a cisgender man. Karon ang iyang kung mo ang expectation sa iya syempre magminyo, no? Na ay expectation nga dapat makauyab siya babae. Na ay expectation nga maminyo na siya at the age of 24, 25 or even earlier. And kung dili na ma-meet ng mga expectations unsa may kasagaran treatment or reactions ng mga tao na ay devaluing, na ay skepticism. Labaw na kung ang cisgender man makauyab ng kapwa na layaki. No? So, na ay mga criticisms, mga marites sa kilid sa daya na hala, unsa man ni nahitabo, murag lahi man ang atong expectations, lahi man iyang ginabuhat. So, demonyo, devil. There are reactions that are like that because when people don't understand, they believe it's something evil. Anyway, in the Philippines, what are the usual reactions of people when they see someone deviating from their expected gender roles? For example, cisgender woman becoming president of the Philippines. So, tung si Leni Robredo before ni Jagan as a presidential candidate, kasagaran mga parents nato na mga edad, mga in their 50s, in their 60s, kasagaran ilang comment, dili kaya ni Leni Robredo ang pagka-president tungod kay babae siya, woman siya. And it was, it was sad to hear comments like that na ay di ay ing-ana ng mga stereotypes jud gihapon until now, no? Cisgender woman becoming a chief of police force. So I'm sure people would also have similar reactions when this happens. Another example, a cisgender man using a tote bag. Sometimes ang uban dili comfortable mulantaw sa cisgender man nga gagamit ng tote bag. Kay mo ingon sila, hala bayot. Hala feminine, very feminine. And I'm not comfortable looking at you with that tote bag. So ang question karon, is that a correct reaction? where is that reaction coming from? Unsa man di ay imong assumptions? Are you imposing gender roles? Are gender roles, should gender roles have to be fixed? So remember, gender roles are fluid. It can change. They change. They can change through time. Transgender woman joining the Miss Universe pageant. That's an issue. I'm sure you can relate to this issue very well. Transgender man singing a feminine ballad song, and non-binary person being just themselves, not harming anybody. So na ay mga non-binary person, I think tong anak ni Miss Sharon Cuneta, uh, ang isa sa iyang mga anak ni come out as non-binary, ang uban kina-criticize tong iyang anak na wala man sila gibuhat. Wala may gibuhat tong anak ni Sharon, just being themselves. Tapos grabe grabe na ka-skeptical and grabe na makapanamay ang ubang tao. So kung makabati ta ani, I invite you to question asa man ni gikan, why is this the case? Ngano man ing ani man mag-isip ang mga tao? Probably they still have that limited view of gender, na ang gender ilang gina-confuse as sex, no? Na ang sex or ang sex and gender together have to have two categories only, being a man, a woman, being boy or girl. That leads us to the gender binary. Unsa man daay ning gender binary? The gender binary refers to a structure of understanding, a frame of believing wherein sex and gender are viewed as consisting of only two choices: male, female, man, woman, masculine, feminine, and nothing in between. When we think about sex and gender in a binary system, we tend to identify characteristics that are exclusive to one or the other rather than traits that many people across different genders share. Okay? So this can be problematic, no? Kaning moingon ra kita na a baby is either boy or girl, as if we are forcing the baby to fit into these two existing boxes, to the point na if a baby na ato nang gi-assign na boy siya tapos later on mahimong feminine, masad na ta, mag-uol na ta, ato nang i-criticize, atong i-punish, atong i-demonize. No? Again, this is a start. This should be a start of, a new set of attitudes on your part to have a wider appreciation of the complexity of humans. Kaya again, ang gender is a multifaceted quality consisting of not only biology, but also how the person thinks of themselves, how a person chooses to express his or her gender, and even the patterns of attractions that they may have. Okay? Why is it that our society seems to maintain the gender binary? Karon 2023 na, ngano man kasagaran sa mga tao, gusto mga jud nila nga between male, female, between man, woman. Kung sa may rason, one answer is the power or social influence. We will unpackage or unpack this content in later chapters. No? The gender binary is so ingrained in our culture that most of us do not notice nor question it. Even the way we speak is inherently binary. So, di ba? Ang sa may naa sa ato, he, she. Maora na, always. Throughout history, multiple genders are recognized. A significant number of mao ni ang na-overlook ng kasagaran mga tao, no, na in many parts of the globe na ay mga cultures na nag-recognize na ng multiple genders na dili lang binary. A significant number of people have begun to use words like non-binary or genderqueer to describe themselves. They may see themselves as androgynous or gender neutral, or they may oppose the strict boundaries of binary gendering. Now, let's go to gender nonconformity. Unsa man ni siya, GNC. Now, to answer that question, let me ask you, do you know these people? Who are these people? Ah, sige, I'll give you time. You can answer sa imong sitra karon as you watch this video. Also, kinsa man ni siya? This person is Gretchen Custodio Gies. She's a transgender woman who was prevented from using a women's restroom by a janitress who insisted that she use the men's restroom. This was in 2019. She was arrested by police. The janitress then said, "May utin ka pa rin, tandaan mo yan." And that was a very controversial um, event, no, in 2019, na it sparked a lot of conversation surrounding gender identity, gender expression, being transgender in general. That do we really have to insult or hurt anybody just because we don't understand how they express or present themselves, how they identify themselves? Now, when we say GNC or gender nonconformity, that refers to someone, the experience of anybody who doesn't identify or express culturally accepted gendered behaviors or actions associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. Okay? Generally, sa term padaan nga non-conformity, mauni ang mga tao nga dili mo conform sa gender binary. So, na ay expectation nga dapat congruent ang na ay congruent ah, na ay expectation nga dapat congruent ang imong sex and gender identity. So, kung dili ka cisgender man, dili ka cisgender woman, you are gender non-conforming. So that's why we can read here. Some people describe their gender identity as gender non-conforming or GNC. Now, what are other examples of gender non-conforming behaviors that you can think of? I will leave this question to you. Important thing to note here is that people who demonstrate gender non-conforming behaviors may identify in various ways, including a cisgender. Cisgender can be gender non-conforming. That is kung ang iyang gender expression lahi, ang iyang patterns of expression lahi sa kung unsay gi-expect ng society. Okay? So, maotong example nako a while ago. A man born with penis and naa siya gender identity nga man siya. So, the person is cisgender man. Karon, mugamit man siya tote bag. Naaraman siya sa balay, nagbantay man ng bata, wala man siya trabaho, si may housekeeper. Or in some occasions, a cisgender man in a relationship siya, in a romantic relationship with a fellow man. That is how you see someone as gender non-conforming or GNC. Okay? However, many people who identify themselves as GNC often see themselves as falling under the transgender umbrella. Okay? Pero daghan pa ning GNC, gender nonconformity, non-binary, agender, bigender, multigender, gender fluid, and genderqueer. Now, to respectfully use the correct gender identity for someone, take note that it is best usually to ask them directly. Pero syempre, you don't ask the person in public, no? If you are really so curious and if it's important, for example, ang inyong guest speaker, you are suspecting transgender siya or naa siya'y preferred name, naa siya'y preferred pronoun, that is when you can ask the person respectfully, privately, na ma'am, sir, how do you wish to be called? How do you prefer to be called? What are your pronouns? Because misgendering someone can cause discomfort on the person. There are many drag queens in the Philippines who are transgender women and they don't want to be addressed using their full names or their government names. They have their drag names. Gani. So, mao'y dapat atong dawaton. That brings us to this idea of how to use singular they na yung mga tao nga pilosopo kaayo na sa Facebook, TikTok, they criticize the use of they kay lagi daw ang they plural man siya nga pronoun. But remember that things have changed, no? Because of um the evolution of how we because of how complex it is now that we understand gender, naana pod tay complex usage of terminologies to address or to match kung unsa pod ka complex na ang understanding nato of gender. So we have singular they. Unsa man siya paggamit? First, if you are addressing a non-binary person. So if someone openly addresses or openly labels themselves as non-binary, dili nato siya tawagon as he or she. We use they or them. So that is singular them, singular they. Also, we use singular they as a universal gender neutral pronoun. Okay? So if we don't know the gender identity of a person, it's always best to address them as they or them. And also, if we are not sure of the person's self-identified gender or gender identity, if it's unknown, we use singular they. Okay? Now, what does it mean to be transgender? Transgender, as defined earlier, refers to someone who identifies with a gender that is outside the expectations associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. Men born with vulvas and ovaries are transgender men or trans men, while women born with penises and testes are transgender women or trans women. So you might have encountered in the past this question, do we consider trans women as women? In the context of our conversation today through this lecture video, the answer is yes. Okay, because being a woman is not about having biological characteristics, or it's not about having the external genitalia that you associate to being female. Being female is different from being a woman. Okay, being a woman is a matter of gender identity. Important notes. Being transgender is separate from being gay, lesbian, or non-binary. They should not be confused with one another. So, naatay mga transgender women, atong i-simplify because siguro of the limited language that we have, tawagon nato sila nga bayot. We don't do that. Okay? Because later, as you will see, transgender women are not bayot, they're not gay. Many of them consider themselves as straight or heterosexual. Being transgender is not an extreme version of being gay. Also, this is a misunderstanding. So, maingon kita na, okay ra nang bayot ka, kanang mag-ilis ka ng panglayaki, pero ayaw lang pag-cross-dress. Ayaw lang pagpa-opera. Kay grabe na gajud nakabayot. No. Remember, the way I use the term biot refers to homosexuals, and homosexuality is a domain of sexual orientation, and we haven't touched sexual orientation yet. Okay. And last thing, it's not a result of some trauma, poor parenting, or abuse. As I mentioned earlier, as early as 3 years old, children or toddlers already have their sense of gender identity. Okay? So sa kana nga early age, walay necessary trauma or poor parenting or abuse that have to occur for an individual to become transgender. Sometimes it's in the brain, and later we will cover that also, no? We will cover that in future chapters, future lecture videos. Transgender identity remains to be stigmatized in many societies, including in the Philippines, which is why young children who are gender nonconforming cause distress to parents and caretakers. Di ba, tinuod? Parents become so concerned for their children na makitaan nila signs of being transgender na syempre they fear for their children. Kaya base lagi ma-discriminate. Kasagaran in the Philippines na sila, you know, ang mga parents mo accept sa ilang mga bata. Pero these parents are worried of how others might treat them, no? Treat their children who are transgender. These young children are GNCs who are GNCs experience anxiety and are getting warned of embarrassment or bullying, no, in schools. Note that many masculine presenting girls or tomboys do not grow up to be transgender. Maupod na inyong timan-an, no? Na ay mga boyish na mga girls or tomboys. Dili sila mahimong transgender. Okay? Kay being tomboy is also different. Just a matter of gender expression, dili siya gender identity. Many feminine boys do not grow to be trans girls. Na ay mga boys, no? Nga feminine lang yun sila. They're not trans women. Okay? Ang uban, mga feminine boys, magminyo gani. Okay? And not all transgender young people demonstrate gender nonconforming behaviors or gender nonconforming expressions. Gender identity can be closely related to gender expression, but they are not necessarily equivalent. We have a question here. How do we know when someone is transgender? Again, we ask the person. We don't look at how the person dresses up. We don't look at the person whether the person has undergone sex reassignment surgery. It's not about undergoing these complex medical procedures. It's about whether the person thinks of themselves as kung unsa nga gender. Okay? So, balik ta sa definition, ang pagka-transgender is gender identity within the SOGIE conversation. So tungod kay naaman siya sa SOGIE or naaman siya sa GI, gender identity, it's about cognition, belief, thinking, understanding of the person. Wala siya magdepende sa gender expression, wala siya magdepende sa sexual orientation, wala siya magdepende sa sexual characteristics. Okay? Next, I think this is the second to the last question. What does it mean to be intersex? So this is something that should change the way you look at sex. We know that from biology, we know from biology that there are two sexes, being male and being female. But in the context of this subject, in this lecture video, sex is now a continuum, now a spectrum. Okay, there are sexes in between. So naay individuals nga dili siya mo fit sa pagka-male, dili mo fit sa pagka-female. Okay? Naa siya in between. So intersex people are those people whose sexual or reproductive organs develop differently than the typical male or female pathways. Before, they were called hermaphrodites, but we don't use that terminology anymore because that can be offensive. Generally, we call them people with differences in sexual developments. Okay? Dili pod siya disorders of sex development. Okay? Most intersex people are healthy, and their only major difference from others are their sexual or reproductive organs. The usual appearance of their organs would be like this one. So, aphalia, murag na ay gamay diha nagawasana ng ihi, no? Pero o naa siya'y testicle, so naapoy sa clitoromegaly. So, vagina siya na murag ang clitoris is bigger. Also chordy, where the head of the penis formed as if it were female while the other parts continued on as male. Okay? And other things, di ba? So, kaning other examples, you can see medyo nag-mix up gyud ang male reproductive organs and female reproductive organs. Again, when doctors look at these external presentations of the genitals, maglisod sila pag-categorize na labaw na karon unsa may atong existing categories being male and female lang man. Okay? So take note, we call these people intersex. Some intersex people consider themselves to be part of the LGBTQ spectrum while others dili. Kaya naman dili man sila part ng LGBT. Tungod kay, again, ang pagka-intersex is just S in the SOGIE conversation. Again, in the SOGIE conversation, sex is just, is it just touches on your sexual characteristics, not necessarily gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. Pero naiuba na they're part of the LGBTQIA. Later, I'll expound on whether unsay rason aning LGBTQIA. Longer forms of the abbreviation often include the word intersex, and I will leave you these questions. Is being intersex a disease or medical condition? Is being intersex a type of gender? Are transgender people and intersex people the same? Are intersex people automatically gay or lesbian? You ask these questions, you try to investigate for answers to these questions. Now, last question. What does gender have to do with sexuality? If you are tired of listening, you may pause and you can watch this lecture video later, but I'm gonna continue discussing. Gender and sexuality are linked to each other. Gender identity refers to how we understand ourselves, no? Mao to atong gender categorization, self-categorization, while sexuality is defined as the gender or genders of the people we are attracted to. The bigger, the more comprehensive or inclusive term that we can use for sexuality in this context is sexual orientation. SO. Sexual orientation is an enduring pattern of romantic or sexual attraction to persons of the opposite sex or gender, same sex or gender, or to both sexes or more than one gender. So you see, sexuality is very complicated. It's a complex subject matter. Sometimes you don't understand people, the way they form attractions or form relationships with others. Unsa maning social sexual orientation spectrum, it's broad. First, we have heterosexual or being straight. These are people who get attracted to opposite sex or opposite gender. Okay? Earlier, I mentioned transgenders consider themselves as heterosexual. Some of them, no? Kay nga naman, that is correct, no? Kay if someone is transgender, nabilong siya sa kantong gender binary, no? Let's say a trans woman. Trans woman is woman. Ma-attract siya sa men. Okay? So in that case, ang iyang gender identity opposite sa kung unsay gender ng iyang ginauyab. Okay? So in that case, that is heterosexual. Okay? Ang homosexual is when a person gets attracted to someone of the same sex or gender. Okay? So na ay mga tao nga cisgender man. Okay? Cisgender kay wala siya confusion sa iyang body. Happy siya sa iyang body. Manamit siya pang layaki, iyang gender expression pang layaki, pero ma-in love siya sa kapwa layaki nga layaki pod manamit kanang cisgender man pod. So tungod kay same gender man, that's homosexuality. Okay? So dili lang siya same sex, same gender. Okay. Bisexual are people who get attracted to both sexes or genders. Pansexual or queer people whose attractions span across many different gender identities. Questioning or curious people who are unsure about their sexual orientation. While being asexual are people who don't experience any sexual attraction for anybody. There are people who are like that. People who are asexual, who don't get aroused, who don't develop attraction, who don't have crushes. Eh, siguro focus sila sa ilang pag-eskwela and some of them don't even get married because they don't feel the need and they don't have, they don't experience such urge to form sexual relationships. Sexuality or sexual orientation is, take note of the term, enduring. So mula nga kita, enduring pattern of romantic or sexual attraction, kanang pattern na gajud na magdugay, dili lang kung for a moment. Okay? Why do I emphasize that? Tungod kay, ang sexual orientation, take note, that can be independent from a person's gender identity and gender expression. Okay? So, pwede lahi siya sa gender identity or gender expression. Particularly na atay mga sexual activities na ay mga tao nga mo perform ng sexual activities na regardless of gender identity, murag maalaan siya nga sexual orientation, but no. These are plainly sexual activities. Na ay mga tao nga sex workers, prostitutes, no, escorts, ang ilang source of income kanang maghatag ng sexual services. Na ay mga tao nga cisgender man and heterosexual pero they have sex with men. Okay? They're men who have sex with men. Kana kay livelihood raman, dili man siya kung enduring pattern of sexual attraction kay ila raman na gibuhat for for income, no? Dili siya nag-reflect ng sexuality or sexual orientation. So that's why tinuod ng mga moingon nga hala ni pato lagi siya layaki, hala bayot na siya. Pero ang mga tao moingon nga dili man na necessarily bayot. Okay? Kaya again, we stick to the definition of sexual orientation as an enduring pattern. So people can commit sexual activities that will confuse us in terms of their sexual orientation. Naapoy women um who have sex with women, no, or female have sex with female. And ang heterosexual sex, individuals who engage in sexual activities with another of opposite gender. Kaya naaman po yung mga heterosexual people nga mo engage sa heterosexual sex but dili ba pasabot na dili na sila homosexual. Okay? Now, as we close this lecture video, this is the best way to summarize this introduction to gender and society. Our understanding of gender has to change, and that it is multifaceted because it consists of several components. As we can see here, mauni ang gender-bred person illustration where you can see SOGIE as first, sex, mauni ang biological aspects of gender, ang external genitalia, and even internal reproductive organs, apil na ang chromosomes and hormones that are flowing through your bloodstream. And second, naatay sexual orientation or the O, patterns of emotional, sexual, romantic attraction to other persons. And we can see that in the illustration sa heart, kay syempre, ang imo man ang relasyon, asa ka ma in love. And GI, gender identity, is your cognition, the belief of your identity. So mauna na siya sa brain. Okay? And E, gender expression, ang imong outward observable behaviors. How you dress up, your mannerisms, how you groom your hair, kung taas pa or bobo, and mao to siya. Here is an infographic that I found online. Idyo siyang makita nga ang gender identity, spectrum siya or continuum, bote pasabot, walay binary. Yes, na ay woman, na ay pagkaman, pero na ay in between, na ay non-binary. The same with biological sex. Yes, na ay gihapon binary, magka-female, pagka-male, but na ay in between. The same with expression, na ay feminine and masculine, and there is something in between that is being androgynous. Here's another infographic I found online, and idyo makita dire similar rendering of the concepts of anatomical sex na pagka male, intersex and female, and then gender identity. So take note, 'di ba? Mas kompleto ang iyang rendering of gender identity kaysa tumoy there is sa right side sa inyong screen karon, being a man or being a boy, tapos in between sa woman and girl is mauning gender queer or gender fluid. Okay? Katong non-binary mautong wala gyud sa pagka-woman or pagka-man. Okay? Gender expressions can be feminine and masculine and in between androgynous, but people can be agender or gender neutral. Okay? And here is a detailed rendering of sexual orientation. Asa man ka ma-attract. If you have attraction to no genders, you are asexual. If you are attracted to one gender only, so depende ka ron kung same gender. So you become or you are gay or lesbian. Or kung opposite gender, you are homosexual, no, heterosexual. Okay? If you are attracted to both male and female genders, bisexual. All gender identities, pansexual. Okay? Now, in closing, SOGI is an inclusive terminology which refers to human persons' complex gender-related and sexuality-related identities. SOGI components can be independent of one another, which means that sex may not be equal to sexual orientation at all times, and sexual orientation and sex may not correspond to gender identity at all times, and these three together um, may not always be congruent to gender expression. So naa siya'y equal cancel sign, whatever that's called. Okay? Now, as a take-home lesson, this is from me. Take note that we have this presentation because of the advances in modern science. That modern science has offered insights for us to understand that gender is not a rigid dichotomy. It's not about being man or woman, not about being male or female, but it is a spectrum, it is a continuum, and it has various facets. This brings us to SOGI, and this requires a shift towards greater acceptance and respect for diverse sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Now, what's your take-home lesson? This is where I end this lecture video. Thank you so much. This has been Sir Monch of Surigao del Norte State University. And I leave you these critical thinking questions. Be ready if you are my student. I might use these questions for you to answer in class. Goodbye and have a good day.